Spring 1972. Inside the Rolling Stones' Mobile studio parked at Mick Jagger's country estate, Jimmy Page is listening to playback of something that doesn't sound like Led Zeppelin. John Paul Jones is demonstrating a keyboard part that belongs on a prog rock record, not a blues-heavy rock album. Robert Plant is writing lyrics that have nothing to do with anything they've done before. John Bonham is playing a beat that makes it impossible to dance, stepping on and off the rhythm like he's trying to confuse people on purpose. This is the follow-up to their biggest triumph, the album with Stairway to Heaven, the one that made them untouchable, and they're about to throw it all away. In 6 months, Rolling Stone will call this album dull and confusing. Critics will accuse them of losing their way. Some fans will feel betrayed. But right now, in this room, they only know one thing. They refuse to repeat themselves, even if it destroys them. By 1972, Led Zeppelin had achieved something most bands only dream of: sustained commercial success, critical respect, sold-out tours. Their fourth album had proven they could match mysticism with commercial power. But success creates its own kind of pressure. The industry expected more blues-heavy thunder, more Black Dog, more rock and roll, more of what worked. Page and Jones had recently installed home studios, a luxury that changed how they worked. It meant they could experiment privately, arrive at sessions with complete compositions, explore ideas without the clock ticking. The band reconvened at Stargrove's, Jagger's manor house, with the Rolling Stones mobile studio. They'd used it before for their fourth album. The environment was freewheeling, creative, unstructured. Eddie Kramer returned as engineer. The setup was familiar, but the music they were pursuing was not. Page had written an orchestral-sounding instrumental he called The Overture. Jones was layering mellotrons and synthesizers in ways that sounded more like progressive rock than hard blues. Plant was drawing inspiration from experiences on the road, from George Harrison's comment that Zeppelin never did ballads. Something was shifting. The band that had defined heavy rock was now chasing funk rhythms, reggae grooves, delicate acoustic passages. They were expanding. But what they didn't realize yet was that this freedom would make it impossible for them to sound like a coherent band at all. The sessions at Stargrove's should have been smooth. They had experience. They had confidence. They had the Stones' mobile studio and a country estate to themselves. Instead, the process revealed tensions that hadn't been there before. Bonham created a funk beat for what would become the crunge, a rhythm that intentionally defied convention, stepping on and off the beat. Page heard it and added a funky riff. Plant channeled James Brown, asking, "Where's that confounded bridge?" as a tongue-in-cheek reference to Brown's "take it to the bridge" catchphrase. It was clever. It was experimental. It was also completely unlike anything they'd done. Jones brought No Quarter to the table, a song built around keyboards, not guitar. An early version had been attempted during the fourth album sessions but abandoned. Now Jones reworked it with piano, synthesizers, a mellotron creating an eerie warbling texture through an EMS VCS3 synthesizer. Page applied vari-speed to drop the whole song a semitone, giving it a thicker, more ominous mood. Then there was Die Macher, Bonham's attempt to merge reggae with 1950s doo-wop by leaving a short offbeat. Jones later admitted he disapproved of it, saying it was treated as a joke and not thought out well. But Plant thought it could be a hit. By the time they moved to Olympic Studios in London and Electric Lady in New York for mixing, something was clear. This album had no sonic center, no unifying thread. Each song pulled in a different direction. Funk, reggae, ballads, progressive rock flourishes, hard rock closers. It was diverse. It was ambitious. It was also dangerously scattered. The album was supposed to be released in January 1973. It wasn't. The cover art became a problem. Page had commissioned Hypnosis, the London design studio behind Pink Floyd's most iconic covers, to create something mythic and powerful. The first submission came from Storm Thorgerson, an electric green tennis court with a tennis racket on it. A visual pun. Racket. Page was furious. Thorgerson was fired immediately. Aubrey Powell took over, inspired by Arthur C. Clarke's novel Childhood's End, where all the children in the world unite into a single burning column and depart Earth. Powell envisioned naked children painted with silver and gold makeup, photographed at Giant's Causeway in Northern Ireland. The shoot was a nightmare. For 10 days the team arrived at 4 a.m. seeking a blazing sunrise. For 7 straight days it rained. Overcast skies. Poor light. 2 children, siblings Stefan and Samantha Gates, and 3 adults endured freezing conditions, covered in makeup. Then they ran out of makeup and resorted to car spray paint. The photos were taken in black and white, multi-printed to create the illusion of 11 figures climbing the basalt columns. The results were unsatisfactory. But accidental tinting effects in post-production created something surreal and apocalyptic. The cover caused immediate controversy. Atlantic Records added a paper band around the album to cover the children's buttocks. Some retailers refused to stock it without the wrapper. The band didn't understand the outrage. Page stated that children are houses of the holy. Why would that be controversial? But the delay meant the album sat finished for months while the artwork was finalized. By the time it was ready for release, the band had already been playing several songs live on tour. The mystery was gone before the album even arrived. March 28, 1973. Houses of the Holy is released in the United States. March 30th in the United Kingdom. Led Zeppelin are on their European tour when it hits shelves. The promotional push is massive. The band's management ensures the album climbs the American charts quickly, reaching number 1 by early May. In the UK, it debuts at number 4, then hits number 1 by mid-April. Commercially, it's a triumph. The album will spend 39 weeks on the Billboard 200. It will be number 4 on Billboard's year-end chart for 1973. But commercial success doesn't mean critical approval. And the reviews are beginning to arrive. Rolling Stone assigns it to Gordon Fletcher. He writes that Houses of the Holy is one of the dullest and most confusing albums I've heard this year. He accuses the band of becoming a safe heavy metal band, losing the thunderous excitement that defined them. He finds the grunge and Earmarker off-putting. He says the ocean is diluted with pointless humor. He believes the experiments highlight songwriting deficiencies. Melody makers Chris Welch, usually pro-Zeppelin, runs a headline: Zeppelin lose their way. Disc and Echo calls the album inconsistent, noting that Plant and Page sound strangely sluggish and vacant. The criticism isn't universal, but it's loud. And it's coming from outlets that had championed them before. The band had gambled. They'd walked away from the formula that made them superstars. And now critics were telling them they'd made a mistake. The album's success with fans was undeniable. Sold-out shows, chart dominance. Over the Hills and Far Away became a single, though it only reached number 51. Earmarker was released as a single in the US and became a top 20 hit despite Jones's disapproval. But the band felt the critical backlash. They'd always had a complicated relationship with music journalists. But this felt different. It wasn't just skepticism, it was accusation. They were being told they'd betrayed what made them great. The song remains the same, with its orchestral layers and sweeping attack became a live staple. No Quarter turned into an extended showcase for Jones, often lasting 20 to 30 minutes in concert, with Jones improvising on keyboards, weaving in pieces of Rachmaninoff, Concierto de Aranjuez, or Amazing Grace, the Rain Song. Page's answer to George Harrison's comment that Zeppelin didn't do ballads proved they could match delicacy with power. Plant later cited it as one of his best vocal performances, noting he'd reached a point where he knew he couldn't repeat himself. The Ocean, dedicated to their fans, the sea of heads they faced in auditoriums, featured one of the most famous count-ins in rock history. Bonham's voice, "We've done 4 already, but now we're steady," and then they went 1, 2, 3, 4. The songs worked live. The crowds were massive. The tour was a financial triumph. But something had broken that success couldn't repair. The narrative had been set. Led Zeppelin had made a confusing, inconsistent album, and that verdict would follow them for years. The band didn't apologize, they didn't retreat, they didn't make excuses, but they also didn't forget. The 1973 North American tour was exhausting. They traveled in a custom-painted jumbo jet. They added lasers, mirror balls, pyrotechnics to their stage show. They played to massive crowds. They looked invincible from the outside, but the cumulative toll of years of relentless touring was beginning to show. After the tour ended, it would be 18 months before they toured again. Nearly 2 years before they released their next record. Behind the scenes, the critical reception of Houses of the Holy stung more than they admitted publicly. While Led Zeppelin members often claimed they didn't read reviews, that was never entirely true. They were aware of what was being said. And when they returned with Physical Graffiti in 1975, the opening tracks felt like a direct response to the critics. Custard Pie, The Rover, In My Time of Dying, Trampled Underfoot, Kashmir, heavy, confident, ambitious, unapologetic. It was as if they were saying, "You wanted us to stay in our lane. Here's what happens when we don't." Critics loved Physical Graffiti. The message was received, but Houses of the Holy remained misunderstood. A strange, scattered experiment that confused more people than it thrilled. The shift began slowly. In 1981, Robert Christgau revisited Houses of the Holy for his record guide, Rock Albums of the 70s. He gave it an A. He praised Side 1 as solid lead, with sprung rhythm. He called The Crunge a James Brown tribute parody ripoff that worked. He noted Dancing Days and Dear Macker as two amazing well-danced tracks. AllMusic's Stephen Thomas Erlewine later wrote that, "Throughout the record, the band's playing is excellent, making the eclecticism of Page and Plant's songwriting sound coherent and natural. The songs that had been dismissed as missteps began finding new life." No Quarter became widely regarded as one of the band's finest achievements, a keyboard showcase that revealed Jones as more than just a bassist. The Rain song proved they could craft delicate, emotionally resonant ballads without sacrificing power. Musicians started citing Houses of the Holy as an influence. The willingness to experiment, the refusal to be confined by genre, the confidence to follow creative instincts even when they led somewhere unexpected. By 2003, Rolling Stone ranked it at number 149 on their list of the 500 greatest albums of all time. In 2012, it rose to number 148. In 2020, it dropped to number 278. Still present, still significant, though the list had expanded. The 2014 remastered reissue earned a Metacritic score of 98 out of 100 based on 9 reviews. Pitchfork's Mark Richardson called it Zeppelin's most impressive album on a purely sonic level. The album that critics once called dull and confusing was now being celebrated for its sonic innovation and musical bravery. Houses of the Holy didn't define Led Zeppelin's legacy the way their fourth album did. It never had a Stairway to Heaven. No single song that transcended the album and became a cultural touchstone. But its influence runs deeper than individual tracks. And stranger, it proved a hard rock band could explore funk, reggae, progressive rock textures without losing identity. It demonstrated that commercial dominance didn't require creative conservatism. It showed that fan loyalty could withstand artistic risk, even when critics claimed the risk had failed. When the album was certified diamond by the RIAA in 1999, 10 million copies sold in the US alone. It validated what the band had known all along. The audience was more adventurous than critics gave them credit for. More importantly, it changed what rock bands felt permitted to do. The genre blending that seemed confusing in 1973 became standard practice by the 1980s and 1990s. Rock bands no longer felt bound to stay in a single lane. Experimentation became expected, not risky. Houses of the Holy didn't just survive its mixed reception. It rewrote the rules without anyone noticing. There's a moment in every artist's career where they have to choose, repeat what worked or risk what comes next. Led Zeppelin chose risk. They had every reason to make another Led Zeppelin I-4. The formula was proven. The audience was there. The industry wanted it. Instead, they made an album that confused critics, frustrated some fans, and temporarily damaged their critical reputation. But they also made an album that proved something essential. Creative growth requires the willingness to be misunderstood. Houses of the Holy isn't Led Zeppelin's most beloved album. It's not their most cohesive. It's not the one that defined them. But it's the one that showed they couldn't be confined. The funk experiments, the reggae groove, the keyboard-driven epics, the delicate ballads, the odd-time signatures, the apocalyptic cover art that caused controversy for decades. All of it was Led Zeppelin refusing to be what everyone expected them to be. And in that refusal, they created something that still matters. Proof that the biggest bands in the world don't have to play it safe, even when critics tell them they should.